Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again on Itabar. It is Friday, it is Erev Shabbat. The wonderful smells in the air of the fragrance of Shabbat food. And there's nothing like Shabbat, and we all love Shabbat. And wow, it's been back here already, but this is my second Shabbat back in Israel. And it's a pleasure. So being away, you just really appreciate so much your home, where you live, the land of Israel. It's amazing, it's wonderful. I'd like to open up with a small account of the things that I've been going through the last couple of days. I mean, it's nice things, but I'd like to tell you about it. Yesterday I had a wedding of the son of a friend of ours, a very good friend of ours, and the wedding took place on the Dead Sea, like right overlooking the Dead Sea, and a place called Yiftach Ovnat community out there, and it was a beautiful wedding. And here I'm driving up, left the house here in Itamar at about 4:30 to get there around 6. It's a drive all the way down. Just sitting with my wife in the car, and we're looking around at the beautiful desert scenery and the different scenes, the Jordan River viewpoint. I'm saying everywhere you turn, you're looking at the land of Hashem, the land of the people of Israel. This is amazing. It's just you really feel that you're here. You appreciate every bit and every stone and every tree and everything that grows here in the land, and it's amazing. And wow, was it a spiritual experience? And we get there, and I was looking out across the Dead Sea, and I was looking at the mountains above, and those mountains are the mountains of Moab. We just read about, we had a beautiful Chag Shavuot, a beautiful holiday, and of course we read the story of Ruth, and that's where Ruth comes from, those mountains of Moab. And I was thinking a lot about that since the holiday of Shavuot, and just to be in that area, again, everything comes to life. One of the things I really want to do is give a lesson on the chapters of Ruth, that Megillah, and it's never too late to study Bible, even though we pass the time as far as Shavuot, where we customarily read that. We can, of course, study it any time of the year, and God willing, I want to dedicate it to very special friends from Oklahoma, the Shores, and I will fulfill that promise, God willing, the minute I get a chance. And we will give separate lessons on the book of Ruth. But anyway, let's get back over here to some other stories. Today, I had a back-to-back wedding. So yesterday again, I was out there in the Dead Sea for a wedding in the evening. And today, an unusual experience. A very good friend of mine from Yeshuv Efrat, he got married, and wow, an amazing wedding. It took place in a place called Hashmonaim. Hashmonaim comes after the Maccabees, right near where the Maccabees are buried. The whole story of Hanukkah comes to life over there. And here was a Friday morning wedding, which is pretty rare in Israel, of course, to have a wedding on a Friday morning, but it was beautiful. And Rabbi Riskin, the rabbi of Efrat, he did the ceremony of the wedding. It was beautiful wedding. And again, amazing privilege to get up early, and I drove through the Shomron Mountains, heading down towards the west coast, and driving through the back ways of beautiful scenery of Shomron. I think this is just, again, a gift. It's a gift that we have in our time, just to absorb the spiritual beauty of the land, and God's presence, of course, is everywhere in the land. And it's a wonderful experience. So I just wanted to share that with you. And, well, one other thing I must share with you today. This week's portion is called Naso. Naso means, of course, to lift up. And here's, of course, referring to continuing the counting of the different after we did the first chapter of the book of Bamidbar, we're discussing now counting, of course. Count the nation of Israel and the Levites, etc. And here this week's portion, again, discussing the different functions of the three families of the priests, Gershon, Kehat, Merari. What are the functions? What do they do as far as the tabernacle? Everything is centered around the tabernacle. And here the camp of Israel is being built, and everyone getting their special functions. But this week's portion is very special because it is my son Yosef, his birthday. He just had his 24th birthday, and for a father, I'll never forget his bar mitzvah. This week's portion was his bar mitzvah portion, and this is a story, I I must tell you, although I think we're sort of moving away from the portion, but we'll get back to that hopefully. But the story is so, for me, it's a very moving and special story. My son Yosef, he should live and be well into 120, very special boy. And I remember that as we know, many children going through elementary school, have certain learning disabilities or difficulty in whether it's sitting down and concentration ability, etc., or could it be reading, sometimes difficulty in reading. And these we call them, or dyslexia, or different names today. All the different names that the psychologists have come up with nowadays. But of course, most people do have some kind of learning issues. It's not easy to sit down all day long and study. And I remember when it came time to prepare my son for his bar mitzvah, he was, a lot of people saying he's not the most studious of boys, doesn't sit down, how's he going to sit and concentrate? And wow, God really has a sense of humor, and he gave him the portion of the week, which is the largest portion of the week. And that's this week's portion, PARASHAT Naso. Many verses, and everyone was saying, really, just have him read. It's our custom that he reads from the Torah. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be, really. The bar mitzvah boy will read that portion in front of the congregation, so he has a lot of work to prepare for it. So everyone was saying, it's impossible, how is he going to do it? This guy doesn't like reading, he's not going to concentrate, he has difficulties in reading. And I said, listen guys, Yosef is going to do it. I always told my son, Yosef, you could do it, and don't let anyone discourage you. If you want to do something, you could do it. And we sat down there, and I started teaching him, and we were doing one, and he was so serious about it. And we just kept doing one, as we say, Aliyah, one portion after the next. And he has an amazing memory, and before you knew it, this boy has totally memorized the entire Torah portion. When it came time for his bar mitzvah, he was able to read everything without a mistake. And that was an amazing thing. And I think the story of now, of PARASHAT Naso, I realize has so much to do with this concept of sometimes people in this world can as usually educators, even parents can make big mistakes sometimes. They can give what's going to come from you, say to the child, or say to the student, all kinds of comments. And sometimes they don't realize that this seeps into a person's heart, and it can bring down their self-esteem and affect them for their entire lives. We must always encourage our children. We must always encourage our students and our spouses and everything that we're around to realize that a person has the power to really get in there and use his willpower to do almost anything if he wants to. And no matter how many difficulties or disabilities one may have, he can overcome them if he really wants to overcome them. And that's an important lesson. And I think Naso, this week's portion, reflects this concept. And I want to see it and show you exactly how that, in my opinion, does. But so let's begin now discussing this Torah portion a little bit. And we'll see how this idea comes to play. First of all, as I mentioned before, PARASHAT Naso begins in these words, and I shall read them to you. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemon. God says to Moses, saying, Naso ad rosh b'nei Gershon. Lift up. Gershon here means, of course, what is going to be the function of the tribe of Gershon. Gam heim levet avotam mishpachotam. Right, every tribe was numbered and they were given a function. And here now we're talking about the family, one of the Levite, one of the families of the Levites. Levi had 3 sons. Gershon, Kehat, and Merarin. He's one of the 3 sons. Ben 30 shana v'mala, from 30 years in age, ad ben 50 shana, till 50 years of age. Tifkod otam. And of course, that was giving the age, from 30 until 50 was the age that they did the work. And zod avodah mishpachot haGershoni, this is what they had to do, la'avodu l'masa, for work and for their lifting. V'nasu et yiriot mishkan, they would have to carry the yiriot, which are the how do you say the yiriot, the curtains of the temple, of the Mishkan, tabernacle with Oel Moed, Michseu, Michsei Atachash, and all the different coverings that they had on the tabernacle. With Masach Betahol Moed, with Kalei Chatzer. Again, they have all these different parts, anything to do with the curtains, etc. And all the tools. It goes on to say that they actually have to carry, and of course the vessels, the tools that they needed, like the pegs and stuff, and things like that, in order to build the, for the building purpose of setting these tents up later on. And then it goes on to say, Zot avodat mishpechot b'nei Gershoni. This is what the family of the Gershonis had to do. Mishmartam biyad Itamar ben Aaron HaKohen. And their mishmeret, which means they were watched over, who was supervised over them? Itamar. Right? Yes, the name of Itamar is mentioned right here in the 6th portion, of course, and it comes from Itamar was buried below our community over here. And it was Itamar, the son of Aaron, the high priest, who was the one who actually supervised over the Levites in their work, and we see it right over here, mentioned in this week's portion. So it's one of the places we talk about where Itamar is mentioned in the Bible and the Torah. It's right over here, connected to PARASHAT Naso, so I think it really connects again. We get to my son Joseph having a bar mitzvah in this week's portion, connect to where he lives. Of course, that's a special connection. But anyway, getting back to the question or the concept I brought up in the beginning about trying to understand that we have tremendous strength inside of us. And if we get the encouraging words by a good teacher, we can actually bring to fruition our unique talent that we have, every individual. I think the lesson here of PARASHAT Naso and these portions dealing with the different tribal functions and the different families of Levites and everyone's different function in the house of Israel, it's a lesson that Hashem has given to every one of us. He's trying to say no one is better than anyone else. Everyone has a special function, of course. And he has to know what his job is, and he has to know what his function is. He has to be encouraged to perform, to work in that special talent that he has. And from that, he can do amazing things. It's exactly what this is all about. The Torah has so much. Look how many verses are mentioned. Look how many, last week's portion, this week's portion, so many verses are used in order to describe the different, again, functions and count everyone, to show that everyone's like a diamond, everyone has a special function. Everyone is a special, priceless jewel in God's eyes. Everyone has a special function that they must do and bring to fruition. And here, Gershon, with the Gershon family, they had to deal with again, which we mentioned, with the different curtains and the coverings. The Merari had to carry the heavy stuff, and it's funny, the name Merari comes from, in Hebrew, meaning mar, bitter. I always say they had a bitter job, man. They had to carry those heavy duty boards for the tabernacle, which was pretty heavy. So again, everyone had their function, and they were all mentioned, as we say in Hebrew, in shvach, with in praise. God mentioned everyone in praise, because everyone understood their function. They were encouraged to do it, and they did it with flying colors, without complaints. We see very little complaints. Of course, the story of Bamidbar mentions the few complaints that there were, but most of the time there was no complaints. 40 years traveling through the deserts. There were if you count the times that there were complaints and trouble, there weren't many. And that's because people understood and they learned to use their inner strength and function to do what God was told them to do, and they were encouraged to do that. And that's again a lesson that we all should take to our hearts. And everyone we see, always encourage them, smile to them, and say, you could do it. Don't say you can't do it. You're not worth it. Focus on their good qualities and what they can do, and it will actually bring them to fruition. I think that's an amazing lesson of PARASHAT Naso. Naso meaning, of course, to lift up. And that's how, again, this week's portion opens. We will have many other topics besides this week's portion. We have also the camp, the holiness of the camp of Israel, and how the different levels of uncleanliness had to separate themselves from the camp. For someone who was unclean to a dead person would have to leave the Shekhinah, the divine camp, and someone who was the middle levels, like the Zav, the Zavah, the Nidah, they'd have to leave the camp of the Levites, and then the lepers would leave, of course, the three camps. Again, the Torah was discussing how important it is for our camp to be pure, and that any uncleanliness, of course, a person has to remove himself, purify himself to return. Again, here's a very important lesson, another lesson of some things that we take for granted, of how important it is for a person to remain holy and purify himself. And sometimes people, again, take it for granted, just living a life of uncleanliness. Now, a lot of times you're not at fault. Like, for example, when a person has been in contact with someone who died, he's in fault that he touched a dead body and he's now unclean? No, of course he's not at fault. And therefore, he's only told to leave the camp of the Shekhinah, the highest level camp, because he's really uncleanness that didn't come from him. But the other forms of uncleanliness came out of his own body. And therefore, it's a stricter ruling regarding, because there's more control over something that comes out of his own body. As we know, impurities will come only because of the person's actions. Just like when a person speaks Lashon Hara, he would become a leper by speaking evil. He himself was the cause of those impurities. And therefore, again, a person has control over himself, what he can do, and he has to purify himself and not, God forbid, make himself unclean. And how much are we surrounded by the world of uncleanliness, of people doing terrible things, immoral things in the world, and how important it is to be holy. The nation of Israel is a nation leaving Egypt now, wandering through the desert, a place where it was sort of a preparation. That's the whole thing, it was a preparation of entering the land of Israel. It would have happened much faster, but because of our sins, it was delayed 40 years. But it was 40 years of really going through a cleansing. It's like one big ritual bath, the entire desert, like a ritual bath of